Hello everyone, Justin here, and here I'm going to review you Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, or otherwise known in Japan, Ryuga Gotoku 8. And this will of course be a spoiler-free review, and anything in regards to the story will mostly be previously revealed in, let's say, preview materials such as trailers, magazine articles, and so on. But there will be some content that I will share that might be spoilers, but nothing that is relevant to the overall plot. And however, I do feel that you need to play the previous game, Yakuza Like a Dragon, first, because this game does continue to expand on some core plot elements from that game, and you do see the impact of it, in which I will get into a little later. And do anticipate some spoilers in regards to previous Like a Dragon games, formerly known as Yakuza. And though this franchise has more titles than Kingdom Hearts, at least the story isn't as convoluted as that franchise's. And I know that I'm looking at a script here, but when I talk freestyle, especially about this game, so many thoughts come together at once in that matter, and it's kind of hard to keep it together and mention everything. So I wrote it all out so I can keep my thoughts in control and leave no stone unturned, or so I hope. So this game takes place around late 2023, give or take a little over 4 years after the previous Yakuza game, and 2 years after Lost Judgment. This time, the game takes place in Ijin-cho in Yokohama, Kamuro-cho in Shinjuku, and this time, and as you already know, this game will also take place in Honolulu, where Ichi is on the search of his long-lost mother, who he thought was killed the night she gave birth to him. And thanks to a tip from Sawashiro, the Wakagashira, or you could say the capo of the gang him and Ichi used to belong to, he sets out to search for his mother. And yes, Sawashiro, he's out of jail for a big-ass crime he did in the previous game. And as to why he's out, well, you gotta play the game to find out. And in Hawaii, it turns out that Ichi's not the only one looking for Akane, his long-lost mother, as every major crime syndicate is after her. Not exactly out of convenience or coincidence, but as the story progresses, there is a good reason why they are all after her, as Ichi's on the search for her in Hawaii. And in addition to Ichi, the party from the last game is back in Songhui. A character from the last game who wasn't playable before is now a playable character in this game. In addition, Kiryu is also playable with the RPG system, which I will get into later. And the game also introduces two new characters, Eric Tomizawa, a lowly cab driver who is also a thug, and Chitose Fujinomiya, who is introduced as a housemaid for Akane. And just like the previous games, this also contains themes of friendship and family, and takes them to whole new depths and angles. For example, with Tomizawa, he's introduced as a not-so-friendly kind of guy, but Ichiban, with his positive nature, manages to get through to him, even though Tomizawa tells him, like, hey, I've done all this shit to you, why do you want to be my friend? And it's the same with Chitose. They're both willing to admit that they didn't start off on the right foot with Ichi, and think it's weird he's willing to put his own faith in them. But Ichi's the type of guy who wants to see the good in other people, no matter what bad they may have done to him regardless. And I think of it as a good expansion on the ending with him and Masato in the last game, and it really truly shows who Ichiban is. I also love how the game gives a chance for Kiryu to have a relationship with Ichi and some of Ichi's friends. And like in the previous game, it was very open with the fact that it's unapologetically an RPG, and the story finds a way to fit Kiryu into these elements and will make perfect sense once you get around to playing it. And as indicated in the previews, Kiryu is terminally ill with cancer, and when you play the game and understand the nature of his role, you'll understand why he's determined to go through what he has to do, regardless of his illness. And as to why the games made him sick, one of the producers also went through a battle with cancer and decided to include that particular nature in this game. It does give Kiryu a different kind of human side, and it allows veterans of the franchise to really reflect what he has gone through throughout the entirety of the franchise. So there's like this whole bucket list thing where, you go to certain places, you meet certain people, and this also affects like how he will fight in the game as well. Like, it'll also expand his stats, which I think is pretty cool. And I like how the game further explores Ichi's relationship with Saiko, which you'll have to play to find out. And I like how Chitose incidentally mixes things up a bit. But with her and Eric as individuals, once you get to know them, you'll grow to love them just like Ichi did. And just like in the last game, it does dive into some social issues, this time in Hawaii. And this is the reason why I'm wearing this shirt, the Hawaiian setting. And a lot of other reviewers out there, especially those native to Hawaii, have already made videos about these issues, so feel free to watch those videos. And I haven't been to Hawaii in years, but I do have relatives on my mother's side who live there, and my mother does go there periodically to visit them. And she tells me that the homeless camps are prevalent there, largely because of the high cost of living. And this is also true in other places like in the US, like Northern California, where I used to live, and people who are homeless there are actually gainfully employed, but it's just too fucking expensive to rent or buy there. And the game does a good job of addressing those very factors, especially in Hawaii. And I say the game also deals with cancel culture to some degree, or more specifically false accusations or spontaneous media that is meant to be malicious and how it can ruin a person's reputation, especially, and this is the Tatara channel thing, especially when that person isn't given a chance to have their say. And even though it's not exactly a prevalent theme, you do see how a world of everyone having phones with camera features like to use them to exploit others for fame and money at their own very cost. And the game also explores another aspect of the Daisaikan, or the Great Dissolution, in reference to the Omirengo and the Tojokai disbanding in the last game. And Lost Judgment does explore one aspect with the younger members, but this game explores how it affects the more traditional members, especially those that have been legally affected, and how certain draconian laws, no matter how well intended they are, can have negative effects, especially when they're trying to reintegrate into society in a very legitimate sense. And before I move on, there is one thing that needs to be addressed, and there's that scene that Ichi has with Namba and Arachi about him with Saiko. I won't get into the nature of that scene for spoiler reasons, but I know that some people have accused that scene, or the translation of that scene, if that is the case, of being woke. I know in the past year on X or Twitter, whatever the fuck you want to call it, people have been accusing translations or localizations of anime, manga, and video games of having a woke agenda because a small collection of games and anime have certain words like fragile male ego for tsundere, or references to Gamergate, which I have no idea what the fuck that was about, but I've seen that conversation in the game play out in English on YouTube, and I played the game in Japanese, and the translation pretty much reflects what is said in the original Japanese. I will admit, I am the furthest thing from being liberal, and I'm not a conservative either. But these accusations of wokeness in the slightest sense and context to that scene is just fucking stupid. I'm not fond of wokeness either, but that very conversation is something that is real in Japan and the world. I mean, you can and should be against racism and sexism and transphobia, which I am. I mean, but to me, being woke is practically, let's say, white people saying something like a logo or a sports team is offensive to, let's say, indigenous people, which I'll admit is a reasonable argument. But when that group of people speaks for themselves by saying they are offended by such portrayals, white people will still insist it's racist, and that's what I consider to be what woke is. That's just my opinion. And as how political correctness pertains to Japan, I recommend watching a presently airing drama called Extremely Inappropriate, or Futeki Setsu ni mo Hodo ga Aru in Japanese, to really understand where Japan is now in terms of political correctness. I feel that show does a good job of addressing it from all angles, and how the values of the Showa generation, no matter how crazy they may seem, still have their ups, and, no matter how well intended the modern world is with, how we look at things, like, sometimes we do take this shit too far. But moving on, as I said before, I played the game in Japanese, and both, the voice and text, and it's something that I've been doing since the beginning. I imported the original PS2 game when it came out in late December 2005. I didn't know whether or not it would have an international release, and I had already been studying Japanese for 6 years, and I was already planning to move to Japan the following March, so I figured, fuck it, buy the Japanese game. I also bought the rest of the series in Japan, and playing in Japanese has been a personal habit of mine since then. And I tried playing my brother's copy of the PS2 game in English, and couldn't get past the first chapter. I know it has its fans and it has its charms to the fan base, but I'm a self-admitted purist, and the dub wasn't for me, and I do appreciate why players would want one, and I'm glad that since the Fist of the North Star game, every installment has managed to get a dub. And I'm glad that the fans have one, and I do think it does help the game internationally. I also know that Kiryu's new voice actor, Yang Ye, has been a source of controversy for a whole variety of reasons, and I watched his performances on the YouTube. And he's a hit or miss for me on many scenes. And we've already talked about the whole fucking Judgment Song thing in my last video of Gaiden. And I also saw that the English version does include Hawaii Pidgin English, and some of the characters speak in a Hawaiian accent, so I think that's a good way to make the game more authentic. But yeah, I'll give it a chance when I can. But I do like how Adachi's Japanese voice actor, Akio Otsuka, who also played Tamiya in Ryuga Gotoku 3, does make subtle references to the fact that he's also the Japanese voice for Solid Snake in Metal Gear Solid. For example, in Yakuza Like a Dragon, he tells a guy pointing a gun at him that he has the safety off. And in this game, he does say the Japanese equivalent to "kept you waiting, huh?" or "matase dana," but in a more comedic tone. And I am also aware that the English version got Danny Trejo to play one of the villains, Dwight. And I saw his English performance on YouTube, and I did get a kick out of it. And I do consider myself a casual fan of Danny Trejo. Overall, I think the acting in the Japanese game is superb, and I will consider playing the dub when I get around to playing it again, if I, can handle it myself. And as a Japanese speaker and as a professional translator, I give all my props to the team who worked on this. Translating any installment of this game is definitely a Herculean effort. There are certain terms that can be difficult to put into English or maybe any other language, and I'm glad that the team managed to pull it off in their own ways. I'll admit that there are some lines that I would have translated differently, and not because of any stupid-ass political views, but simply that's not the way I would translate a line. This isn't a spoiler, but there's a line that says, "Someone wasted money like paper," which is understandable, and hey, I say it works, but I would have replaced paper with water, but that's just me. And that phrase came to mind because that's something people said about Eric Bischoff when he ran World Championship Wrestling in the later half of the 90s. And as I said before, the game is a turn-based RPG, and probably one of the best modern RPGs of all time. And I'm a guy who doesn't play much modern gaming anyway, and in case you don't know, I'm a huge retro gamer. But it does an excellent job expanding on the original by adding new elements such as allowing you to move the characters within a certain space as opposed to staying stationary, and allows you to do double teams, back attacks, and gives more opportunities to use traditional weapons such as bicycles, electronic signs, to give more damage. And due to the new Hawaiian settings, it allows new jobs such as being a cowboy, a kung fu movie star, a tropical dancer, a tennis player, a house cleaner, and a football player that have all their own distinguishing movesets. And they are pretty fun. And like in the previous game, you do have a bond or link system, or called Kizuna in Japanese, with the other characters, and the more you level up, the more it allows you to expand on the side stories you share with them, and the moves you can transfer from one job to another. And how you can expand these links is, of course, fighting together, giving presents, or having conversations at the bar, or having conversations like in a certain place. Like the map will have a heart to indicate this is where you can have a conversation. And once you level up the links to a certain level, like take for example, you go up to level 10, you want to change, let's say, this character from a cowboy to an action movie star. You want to keep one of the gun tricks. Once you're level 10, you can take one of the moves and, like, select it. Once you get to level 50, you can do that. Level 75, you can add another move. And once you get to level 100, you can get, like, a super special move from, let's say, one job, and then, like, permanently keep it. So I think that's really cool. And, yeah. And another element that you will occasionally have, everyone once again in the battles, is non-playable backup characters, which is only just in a small, let's say, a small handful of battles, unfortunately. It does bring a new novelty to the combat, and I think it can be further implemented in future installments. And once again, the summon system, called Palmates in English, but Delivery Help in Japanese, is also back. This time, it features new characters you can get through side quests. And like in the previous game, the summon system costs money as opposed to MPs, as you would see in a traditional RPG. And as to why it's called Delivery Help in Japanese, it's a play on the word delivery help, or in the Japanese pronunciation, Deribari Helpu, which is a Japanese originated English term to refer to call girl services. And going back to Kiryu, his default job is Dojima Ryu, or the Dojima Dragon. And when it says turn to fight, you can choose the 3 styles he uses for Zero and Kiwami, which is Kenkashi, which I think is called Yakuza in English, Rush, and which is also Rush in English, and Kuashia, which I think is called Beast in English. But Kuashia kind of means like destroyer, while Kenkashi means Street Fighter. But using Yakuza or Beast, they work too. And with what I like about the Rush style is that you could sort of like attack twice. So it's like, okay, you could attack this guy once, or when you get him to the ground, you could follow up with like a kick to the face of the ground, like your motherfucking Vanderlei Silva. And later on in the game, you could sort of temporarily do the traditional beat 'em up style once you fill up a certain meter. And once you get to that feature, and once you unleash it, like, it's kind of more like the Unleash mode he does in the Dragon Engines games, like, you push L2, and then, like, he's motherfucking Dempsey rolling everyone. Like, he's Ippo from Hajime no Ippo, if you read that manga. And if you haven't, fucking read it. And with Psycho, the funny thing with her is, I won a lot of boss fights where they're kick to the nuts moves. I don't know how that happened. I won't say which boss fights, but a good portion of them, they just all happen to be like, okay, Psycho, kick the dude in the nuts. But, yeah. The only improvement I would suggest is to have other characters have their own special double teams. Like, it just can't be, let's say Ichi or Kiryu, which, let's say, Namba or Psycho, they have their own double teams together. I would like it if, for example, let's say Psycho and Sunhee had their own special double teams, like Merle and Luca would have in Chrono Trigger. Or I would like to see Adachi and Namba have their own special double teams. Or, what was his name? Hang Jungi and Zhao. They should have their own special double teams. It shouldn't just be Kiryu or Ichi with another character. I think that's what a true RPG should be, or that's what should help it become a true RPG. And the side content, holy shit. They could just be games on their own. So I'm like, they're practically fucking games on their own. Starting with, of course, you could play arcade games such as Spike Out, which was also created by Toshihiro Nagoshi, the creator of the Yakuza franchise, Virtua Fighter 3, and Sega Bass Fishing at the game's arcades. And like in real life, the Sega arcades are now known as Gigo, the name of their present owners. And some some of those who have never been in Japan may be thrown off by it, but me living in Japan, it does feel natural to me. So the naming is correct. And I gotta say that Virtua Fighter 3 and Sega Bass Fishing, they don't feel right on a PlayStation controller, so I'll stick to playing them on the Dreamcast. I have an arcade stick and a fishing rod for those games as well. But Spike Out on the PlayStation 5 or 4, whatever version, it works fine. And I also love how Zhao, not really a spoiler alert, he's a Dreamcast fan, so props to him. And another mini-game is Dondoko Island, which is essentially Animal Crossing. I find it fun they use Muku and Gachapin, mascots from Fuji TV, as mascots in this game, and they also use Saya and Yui, who are actual weather girls in Japan, and but they're not from Fuji TV, but they're sort of like, reception girls to a certain extent. It just makes it hard for me to believe that this franchise went from featuring porn stars to these kinds of celebrities. But other than that, the point of the game is to turn this trashy island into a 5-star resort and get people to visit and make lots of money. And for those not familiar with Animal Crossing, it is a bit of a learning curve, but worth it once you master it. And I do own the original N64 release, but I'm not familiar with the new one, so I really had to reacquaint myself as I was rebuilding the island. And another Nintendo franchise that gets a shout out is Pokemon, but with Sujimon. And Sujimon were in the last game, but they were just there to make an index, but this time you gotta catch them all and train them for league battles. And like in the original Pokemon games, certain Sujimon represent the wind, air, and water elements, and you can later use them in the Dondoku Island minigames as well for farming and so on. And another minigame that is somewhat akin to Pokemon Snap, if you want to look at it that way, is you ride on a bus, go around a block in Hawaii, and take pictures of weirdos in wrestling singlets and opera masks to get some points, and then you can convert those points into prizes. And you can also earn points by, collecting trash within the ocean on the beach, and then give it to this chick in a bikini, and then you can get prizes as well. And lastly, another Sega franchise that does get some reference and some love is Crazy Taxi, but as Crazy Eats. It's sort of a spoof of the can collecting minigame from the previous game, but this time Ichi is an Uber Eats bike rider where he collects hamburgers, pizza, and sushi and gives them to customers on the street, and it allows you to make some small amount of money. And I just think that the minigame could have used some offspring and Bad Religion. And if anything, Crazy Taxi should be an arcade game and a future installment, with original music intact. But the only big issue I have with the game is the use of the Hanawa character who was introduced in Gaiden. I understand that Gaiden was kind of a last-minute idea during the development of Infinite Wealth, so I can sort of understand it. But after seeing how Kiryu and Hanawa's relationship develops throughout Gaiden and the shit they went through, and to see how he was used in 8 was really disappointing. And if I look at it through the lens of how this game was in development prior to the conception of Gaiden, I can understand how his character plays out in Infinite Wealth in the end. But coming into this game, having already played Gaiden, I was upset that, since the character had already grown on me, I wanted to see how this character could further develop. But, as for the ending, without going into spoilers, like how I felt with the ending to 7 or Yakuza Like a Dragon, its aftermath can be explored in another sequel to Judgment. But I feel now is a time to give a more comprehensive crossover between Like a Dragon and Judgment. I think it can work, and I'm pretty sure most of the fans do. But if Sega continues in keeping these franchises separate, then hey, I'm okay with that. And I'm sure they can make it work. But anyway, I went on for too long, and I know I could have covered more, but, all I could say is there's just so much to talk about here. It took me 137 hours to play this game, and, if you're a fan of RPGs and you want something traditional, but something with, a bit of modern BAM, then get Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. Alright, catch you guys later.